On June 27, 2015, specifically in Morocco, inside the central prison in the city of Safi, one of the prison guards heard someone screaming outside the building. He went to see where the noise was coming from and was shocked to find a prisoner's head sticking out of the wall. The prisoner's head was covered in blood, and it looked like he was in his final moments. At first, the guard didn't know who it was, but when he got closer, he recognized him, and his blood ran cold. He thought, "This is the perfect moment." He took off his belt, and just before he wrapped it around the prisoner's neck, he heard someone approaching from a distance. He stepped back before anyone noticed, and it turned out to be his colleagues. When they got closer and saw who the prisoner was, without knowing what their colleague was planning to do, they said, "This is our chance to get rid of the nightmare that is Anza the criminal." For those seeing me for the first time, I'm Shams al-Din, and I talk about everything strange and mysterious on planet Earth. Before I tell you today's story, I want to thank you all for your incredible engagement. I never expected to reach 140 subscribers in such a short time. Also, I'd love for you to join me in the dream of reaching 500 subscribers. The number is very close, and our family is growing day by day. But the number of people watching the videos on the channel without subscribing is greater than the number of subscribers. So if you're not subscribed yet, go ahead and subscribe, because that's the biggest support you can give me. Today, I won't ask you to give a like, because you'll do that on your own after you hear our amazing story. Today's story is about the fastest killer in Arab history. No one has ever talked about this case before me, and it's the most famous case in Morocco. It took me a lot of time to gather all the details about it. The important thing is, the killer we're talking about today was a nightmare for all the police, and all the prison guards agreed that as long as Ibrahim Anza was alive among them, their fate would certainly be death, just like all the guards who dealt with him before and whom he killed. On February 12, 1981, specifically in the village of Anza, which is part of the Moroccan city of Taza, Ibrahim al-Hassani was born. His childhood was normal, and nothing significant happened, except that his parents divorced when he was 3 years old. He continued to live with his mother, who remarried twice after his father. Ibrahim lived a normal life, and nothing noteworthy happened during that period. Everything was going well until he turned 18. At that point, he joined the Royal Moroccan Armed Forces. Ibrahim was physically strong and excelled in all the military athletic tests, which got him transferred to the capital, Rabat, where he received many privileges. This made him act aggressively towards everyone for no reason, as if he started to see himself as arrogant. To complete the picture, he was transferred to serve in the military prison. There, he was extremely harsh in his dealings with prisoners, detainees, and anyone accused of anything. Everyone who dealt with him faced unusual cruelty. Over 2 years, he was transferred to serve in 3 different prisons because of his bad behavior and brutal treatment of everyone. Everyone started to know him as the son of Anza, named after the village where he was born. He was a fierce guard, difficult to deal with. Some sources say he was responsible for the deaths of more than 1 prisoner, but there were no charges against him because there was never any solid evidence. All the deaths happened for unclear reasons, so there was no proof of anything, and it was all just speculation. But the real crime happened in 2003. Ibrahim got married in 2001 to a girl he loved, but they hit a dead end and split up after a relationship that lasted more than a year. After their breakup, they had a lot of issues in court, fighting over the dowry and alimony. To explain this a bit more, in Islamic countries, when a man divorces his wife, he has to pay her an agreed-upon amount from before the marriage as a guarantee that the husband won't just think about divorcing his wife the moment he gets interested in someone else. It's also to ensure she has financial support, especially if they had kids. If I'm wrong about this, feel free to correct me if you know more about it. Anyway, One day, a big fight broke out between Ibrahim's mom and his ex-wife's family. It got really heated. When Ibrahim came home and heard from his mom what happened, he immediately went to his ex-wife's father's house and slaughtered his ex-wife there. After realizing the disaster he had caused, he tried to escape, but the neighbors caught him and handed him over to the police. Some sources say that the whole divorce story isn't true, and that the real story is that Ibrahim came home drunk one night, and an argument broke out between him and his wife. Under the influence of alcohol, he stabbed his wife with a knife and killed her. At that point, the neighbors gathered after hearing the commotion. He was crying and screaming when he realized what he had done. They called the police, who arrested him without any resistance. In both versions, the key thing is that the man killed his wife. The method doesn't matter as much as the fact that the man killed his wife. Personally, I lean toward the first story because when I heard the second one, I was surprised that a Muslim would drink alcohol. But after looking into it, I found out that some Muslims do drink, but it's done very secretly and never in public. Also, drinking alcohol is a major sin in Islam, but there's no punishment for it if a Muslim repents to God. However, if they die on the same day they drank without repenting, their punishment in the afterlife is hell according to Muslim beliefs. Anyway, after Ibrahim was arrested, he was tried in a military court, expelled from the Royal Moroccan Armed Forces, and sentenced to life in prison. As fate would have it, he was imprisoned in Ait Malul prison. Of course, don't hold me to these Moroccan names. I'm trying my best to say them correctly. The point is, this was the second prison Ibrahim had worked at while he was still on the job. The first problem Ibrahim faced in prison was with the older inmates who had a history with him. When he showed up as a prisoner, it was like a prize for them because everyone wanted to get revenge. On top of that, Ibrahim didn't respect any of his fellow inmates back in those days, so he was hated by everyone around him. He got beaten by the inmates every day during breaks, and if he complained or told the guards, they'd move him to solitary confinement. In other words, everyone was getting their revenge on him. Wherever he went, even when he left with everyone to go to the dining area, the guards would beat him on the way. In short, he was incredibly hated, and everyone was trying to get back at him. Of course, this only made Ibrahim 10 times more aggressive, and he started living in constant fear and caution. He stayed like this for 2 months, then he planned to escape from prison. The plan actually worked. Out of all the people who hated Ibrahim, there were 3 guards who were his close friends and hadn't forgotten the good times they had together. During that period, Ibrahim treated them with respect. Everyone thought no one liked Ibrahim in prison and that everyone hated him, but in secret, his friends were planning his escape without anyone knowing. Ibrahim had memorized the ins and outs of the prison by heart due to his previous job there, so he definitely knew everything about it, including the internal system and the best time to escape, which was during the break. The escape plan was carried out on the same day a new guard arrived at the prison. The plan relied on taking advantage of the new guard's presence as the key to escape. During the break, instead of going outside like usual, one of Ibrahim's friends snuck into one of the officers' rooms, who was on duty that day, took his uniform, and immediately left the office, heading to where the new guard was. He spoke to him with a tone full of respect and said, "Come with me. We need to leave the prison, you and me." The new guard, without any questions, followed him without saying a word. Like I mentioned before, the guard was new and didn't know everyone yet. They both walked quickly together. Before Ibrahim left the building, he put on large sunglasses, and the guard was walking behind him. The way they looked made it seem like Ibrahim was an officer, and the guard with him was his personal security. When they got to the gate, Ibrahim confidently said to the gate guard, "Open the door." Without any second thought or scrutiny, the gate guard opened it, and both of them walked out of the prison like nothing had happened. The two of them kept walking for about 10 minutes, then Ibrahim turned to the guard and said, "So, how's the job treating you, Kamal?" The guard responded, "Good." But the problem was that the guard's name wasn't Kamal. But out of fear and believing Ibrahim, he didn't argue. He thought to himself, "As long as he thinks I'm Kamal, then I'm Kamal, just like he wants." Ibrahim asked the guard again, "Where are you from, Kamal?" The guard replied, "Excuse me, sir, but my name's not Kamal." Then Ibrahim turned to him and said, "What do you mean your name isn't Kamal?" The guard responded, "Honestly, sir, my name is Abdul Rahman." Ibrahim said, "Oh, so I made a mistake with the name. I was supposed to leave with my new assistant, whose name is Kamal, and I don't know who you are. I thought you were him, so go back to the prison right now and get back to your job." And sure enough, the guard ran back to the prison without even questioning why he had walked with the officer for so long. Of course, after the guard left, one of Ibrahim's friends had been watching their conversation and was waiting in a car. Both of them got in and sped off to a remote coastal area where Ibrahim planned to hide until he could figure out a solution. He didn't want to go back to prison again. That same day, the police launched a massive search for Ibrahim, and the hunt went on for a full week. But Ibrahim was hiding far from where they were looking. He stayed hidden for 3 months, and during that time, he met 2 guys who told him they were in the business of smuggling people to Europe by sea. They asked him for $6,000 to smuggle him out of Morocco, and Ibrahim got the money from his mother to escape and start a new, clean life in Europe. He gave them the money, and on the agreed day, exactly at midnight, Ibrahim showed up at the meeting spot and waited until dawn, but no one came. He tried to contact them and went to the place where they were staying, but no one was there. It turned out the 2 men were con artists and had stolen the money from him. What those scammers didn't know was that they had conned the fastest criminal in the Arab world. Ibrahim spent the next 4 months hunting them down. Eventually, he found out that one of them had gone on a trip to Tétouan, a city in Morocco. Ibrahim traveled there, found out where the con man was staying, and kept an eye on him. He waited until he saw him walking down the street, then suddenly appeared in front of him, and, without a word, slashed him with a sharp blade with such speed that people in the street didn't even realize what had happened. But once the man fell, everyone started screaming. After an hour-long chase, the police finally caught Ibrahim Anza. They took him straight to court, where he was sentenced to death by hanging. Of course, he was sentenced to death because he had been dismissed from the security forces and was now a civilian. After the judge announced the sentence, Ibrahim pushed away the officers who were around him and managed to escape the defendant's cage, running through the court hallways. But eventually, they cornered him in the courtyard leading to the main door. He ran towards the window and smashed it with his hand, grabbed a piece of glass, and attacked the officers who were surrounding him. One of the officers, named Ahmed Shisho, tried to grab him, but Ibrahim, with incredible speed, managed to stab him 4 times, one of which was in the knee, causing his immediate death. After a long fight, he injured 5 officers, and all their wounds were serious. But in the end, they managed to subdue him. Instead of taking him to prison, something really strange happened. The judge broke all the rules and ordered him to be brought back to the courtroom. In the courtroom, they tried him for killing the officer without any official documents or records of the case. In other words, the judge bypassed all the formalities and laws, And before any official report could be written, they tried him and sentenced him to death for the second time. You might ask yourself, why did they do that? After all, he was already sentenced to death. But let me tell you, the reason for this was to take quick action against Ibrahim and not delay his execution at all. After his escape from the courtroom, he was supposed to be brought back to court in a month or two, but the judge bypassed all the laws and shortened the process so that Ibrahim's execution would take place in a matter of days, not months. Indeed, Ibrahim was transferred to Kenitra prison, and I hope I pronounced the name of the prison correctly. This was the last prison Ibrahim had worked at when he was still on duty, so he was familiar with everything there. But in this prison, he had no enemies because he had only served there for 2 months during his life and didn't have enough time to make any enemies. Now let me tell you that what happened inside this prison is beyond belief. When Ibrahim got there, he was hopeless and hated everyone. He had the mindset that he was as good as dead, and most importantly, since he was Muslim, he kept telling the other inmates that he was sure he was going to hell, that his God would judge him for all the people he killed, and that he hadn't asked for forgiveness from their families. So, to him, the number of victims didn't matter anymore, and that's why he wasn't going to let anything stop him. Thanks to his connections with the guards who used to be his colleagues, he managed to get a delay on his execution. The legal loophole he used to get the delay was by claiming that he had a contagious disease and said the disease required tests and medical monitoring. Why? To make sure that he was the only one infected, that he hadn't spread it to anyone else in the prison, and that the disease hadn't spread among the inmates. And sure enough, because of this, his execution was delayed for 2 months. Of course, I couldn't quite understand how he managed to pull that off, or whether there really was a legal loophole like that at the time, especially since we're talking about the early 2000s, when bribery was pretty common in Morocco. So is it really possible to delay an execution just because of a contagious disease to make sure it hasn't spread? Write to us in the comments. The important thing is, one of his friends had told him that a royal pardon might be issued to reduce the sentence, so they decided to play the sickness card and delay the execution. And sure enough, their plan worked. One of the guards, named Tahor Hassan, found out and reported it, which led to an investigation into Ibrahim. He got beaten and ended up in a huge mess, as he was taken to the investigation branch, and his execution was delayed by another 6 months. The authorities wanted to complete the investigation to figure out who helped him, and they wanted to uncover those involved in the delay and the contagious disease story. Despite all the torture and the harsh interrogations, Ibrahim didn't confess or give up anyone's name. After just a month, he was sent back to prison without admitting to anything. When Ibrahim got back, all he cared about was finding out who reported him. And sure enough, one of his guard friends told him it was Tahor Hassan. A few days after learning that, Ibrahim asked his friends to smuggle a knife to him inside the prison, which they did through a girl who pretended to be his old girlfriend and came to visit him. She gave him a sandwich to eat, and the knife was hidden inside. The prison administration let Ibrahim keep the sandwich for 2 reasons. First, because he was on death row, and they expected his execution order to come down in a day or 2, so they figured, let him eat and enjoy what little time he has left. The second reason was that the guard responsible for checking the sandwich was his friend, so the search was pretty superficial, and both of them were in on it. The next day, during the break, Ibrahim managed to get into Tahor Hassan's room before he could react or make any move, and Ibrahim slit his throat from vein to vein. Just then, a guard entered the room and screamed at the top of his lungs, "Emergency!" 5 officers rushed into the room. The 5 barely escaped death, but they were taken to the hospital and stayed in the ICU. One of them was in a coma for a whole year. When he woke up, the first thing he asked was, "Is Ibrahim Anza still alive?" What happened struck fear into everyone's hearts, because Ibrahim managed to stab those 5 officers in just 8 seconds. They calculated the time Ibrahim took to stab the officers from the security cameras, which recorded the moment he entered and exited the room, and it was exactly 8 seconds. He came in, stabbed them, and got out within seconds. Ibrahim then ran from that room into a neighboring room and took another prisoner hostage. You might wonder how one person could do all of this. The answer is that Ibrahim Anza grew up in the mountains, in a remote area. If you weren't strong enough, you couldn't survive there. You needed to gather firewood every day, fetch water from the well, and help people with their fields so you could share in the harvest. On top of that, Ibrahim was physically strong, standing at 7.1 feet tall, way above the average height in Morocco, which is around 5.7 feet. Because of what Ibrahim did, the prison warden showed up and wanted to negotiate with him, but Ibrahim refused and told them, "If you want to negotiate with me, I want the general prosecutor here." But the general prosecutor was out of town, so they started begging him to accept negotiating with the deputy prosecutor instead. Eventually, Ibrahim agreed, and the negotiations went on for 3 hours. According to the law, in a situation like this, when an agreement is reached between a prisoner and the person appointed to negotiate with him, who is usually ranked higher than the prison warden, the result is considered a legal agreement, and the concerned authorities are committed to enforcing it. Ibrahim knew exactly what he was doing, and said, "Instead of waiting for a royal pardon, I'll negotiate it myself." And indeed, his sentence was reduced from execution to life imprisonment in exchange for handing over the hostage and surrendering himself. But they decided to transfer Ibrahim Anza from Kenitra prison to the first prison he entered, which was 8 Melul prison. I hope I pronounced the names of the prisons correctly. So why did they want to move him? To prevent the guards, whom Ibrahim had stabbed, from seeking revenge on him. He was transferred, but the warden of Ait Melul prison held more of a grudge against Ibrahim than anyone else. This warden considered Ibrahim's escape from his prison the first time a black mark on his professional record. As a result, he conspired with officers close to him to indirectly manipulate the guards, having them secretly torture and beat Ibrahim so it wouldn't leak out. They made deals with the inmates, asking them to start problems with Ibrahim and beat him in exchange for help smuggling items into the prison, extra meals, or cigarettes. But Ibrahim had reached a level of ferocity and strength that made it impossible for anyone to defeat him. Every inmate that the guards made deals with backed out after facing Ibrahim and seeing his power. Everyone in the prison started calling him the Wolf because he was sneaky, ruthless, and at the same time, very strong. Gradually, even the officers and guards pulled out of the situation because everyone who bothered Ibrahim ended up getting a threat from him that they'd be his next victim. Over the course of a year, everyone backed down, and no one dared mess with him anymore. Not even the officers themselves. During that time, Ibrahim started selling small groceries in the prison yard to cover his expenses. One of the guards, named Mohammed al-Zahir, conspired against him, confiscating all his goods and beating Ibrahim up. Ibrahim told him, "Everyone I've threatened in this prison, it was just to scare them. But you, trust me, your life is over." Of course, Mohammed al-Zahir didn't take it seriously at first, but everyone advised him to quit or request a transfer to another prison. They told him, "You won't know where he'll come at you from." So the guy put in for a transfer. But unfortunately, what he feared happened. On August 21st, 2009, Mohammed Al-Zahar was walking down the hallway towards his office when he was shocked to see Ibrahim standing in front of him. In the blink of an eye, Ibrahim pulled out a blade from his mouth and slit his throat from vein to vein. This incident was caught on surveillance cameras and only took 5 seconds. I can't upload any surveillance footage of the crimes Ibrahim committed because of YouTube's rules. As usual, the guards charged at him, and 2 of them got injured. 1 survived, but the other died in intensive care. A decision was made to transfer Ibrahim to solitary confinement in the city of Safi, Morocco. Sources say the transfer was planned for 2 reasons. The first was that it would be easier to get rid of Ibrahim in a fight between inmates, and the second was that Safi is a coastal city close to the Spanish Caribbean islands. They figured, maybe he'll escape, and we'll be done with him. When word got out that Ibrahim was being transferred to Safi prison, 10 guards resigned when they found out he was the one coming. By that time, Ibrahim's reputation had spread across all of Morocco. The strange thing is, Ibrahim stayed in that prison from 2009 to 2015, and during that time, he didn't cause any major problems or hurt anyone. There were some minor scuffles, but nothing worth mentioning. Ibrahim was working on something that no one knew about. He spent 2 years trying to cut through the metal bars in his cell using a small file a friend gave him during a visit. He kept filing the bars for 2 years until he almost cut through them. On the day he planned his escape, he removed the bars, threw his clothes out the window to put on once he got out, and greased his body with oil to make it easier to slip through. But his head got stuck. Half of him was outside, and the other half still inside. He tried everything to pull himself back in, but he couldn't. His head and neck were covered in cuts, and he started bleeding heavily, with blood covering his face. Feeling close to death, he started screaming for help. The guard who heard him came and saw what was happening. He thought about killing him. Even when others arrived, they said, "Let's just kill him." But Ibrahim was smarter than them, so he screamed out loud, "So-and-so is trying to kill me," and he repeated it 6 times, naming a different person each time. Because of that, they didn't kill him and were forced to help him, moving him to another cell. After this incident, the guards who wanted to kill him immediately requested transfers from the prison, and they were indeed transferred to other places, because they knew Ibrahim wouldn't let it go and wouldn't hesitate to kill them. Ibrahim, meanwhile, continued moving from one prison to another, from city to city, without anyone knowing why. His final prison was Tulal II, I hope I pronounced that correctly, which was located in Meknes, Morocco. All the torture and hardship that Ibrahim endured throughout his life were nothing compared to what he faced in this prison. The reason was that Ibrahim had become so well known, and everything he did was under everyone's radar. They started treating him like a wolf who had grown old, saying, "Time is stronger than any man, and this guy can't do anything anymore." Some sources say there was a deal between one of the officers and some of the prison guards to reduce his food and torture him so his body would remain weak. Basically, they wanted Ibrahim to die slowly, so he wouldn't have the strength to kill anyone else. Indeed, the conditions Ibrahim faced in this prison were extremely harsh. But a wolf, no matter how old, still has strength and surprises. On November 25, 2017, the head guard decided to punish Ibrahim in front of all the prisoners without explaining why. The prisoners were gathered on both sides, and Ibrahim was brought out of his solitary cell. In a scene straight out of a movie, Ibrahim pulled a tool from his pocket, that no one knew about and attacked all the guards in front of everyone. The first to die was the head guard, stabbed twice in the neck before falling. After that, he stabbed 8 other guards and got into a fight with 3 more. At that moment, a guard from far away came in holding a gun and fired shots into the air to scare Ibrahim. But Ibrahim had already taken out 2 of the 3. Before Ibrahim could turn to him, the guard fired 6 bullets into him, dropping Ibrahim to the ground, though he didn't die immediately. He was taken to Mohammed V Hospital, and 2 hours later, Ibrahim Anza died from severe blood loss. It was discovered that the weapon Ibrahim used to kill the head guard, 4 other guards, and injure 7 more was a volcanic stone. He broke off the wall of his cell. He had been sharpening and shaping it throughout the time he was being tortured. He never threatened anyone or made promises. Instead, he had been preparing his weapon all along. Investigators say it took him at least 5 months to make the stone as sharp as it was. And with his strength and speed, he killed all the guards who faced him with that stone. In total, some counted Ibrahim's victims at 16 dead and 20 injured over his lifetime. But in the end, despite his strength and cruelty, he died like an animal. His name among Moroccans only lived on as the prison butcher. That's our story for today. I hope you liked it. If you did, be sure to hit the like button. And if you're into this kind of content, I suggest checking out this story. See you in the next episode. Take care.